and welcome to the Expat Lifecycle series from suitcase to settlement. By way of introduction, my name is Beth Ward and I head up the partnerships here at Skybound Wealth Management. So why are we here today? Well, that is to really tell you what the internet doesn't. Moving abroad is an exciting leap, but it's also one that is packed with hidden challenges, unanswered questions, and a lot of conflicting information. Google can give you the checklist, but it really doesn't explain what really matters when you're trying to build a new life in a new country. That's where we come in. This series is about real insights, real experiences, and practical advice that cuts through that noise and effectively helping you navigate your expat journey with a lot more clarity and confidence. Whether you're fresh off the plane or firmly planted in your new home, this series is designed to help guide you through every step of that expat journey. In today's episode, Moving to the UAE, the truth no one posts online, we'll be diving into the key financial, practical, and emotional considerations that every expat should be thinking about. Think of this as your go-to roadmap for making smart decisions, avoiding common pitfalls, and making the most of your time overseas. Today, I have with me Mike Coady, CEO of Skybound Wealth Management. Not only is Mike a CEO for Skybound, but he has someone who's lived in the UAE for over 20 years and also raised here as a child. Mike has seen this journey be done right and wrong more times than he can count. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, Beth, how are you?
Good, thank you. So let's just start by talking about what do parents and expats really need to think about before they board that plane?
You know, it's interesting. I've been doing this for so long as an advisor, and it's the simple stuff in many respects. You know, sometimes people are so enthusiastic to get to Dubai, whereas other people take 6 months to 12 months. I typically find when people move very quickly, they're so excited about the beach, the lifestyle, the opportunity, the new career, tax-free status, that they forget many of the basics. So the basics are the simple stuff. What happens to my house? Have I alerted the tax authorities? Have I told them that I'll be moving overseas? If I've moved at a certain type of the year, are there tax implications? What tax implications could there be? Is it on my income? Is it on my gains? Then there's the more responsible stuff like my pensions, my investments, my bank accounts, my insurances, my wills, my guardianship. I think what I'm trying to say is the list goes on. But in many respects, as much time as you should be focusing on your international life, there has to be some focus either before you fly or shortly thereafter about making sure that your house is in order. Many of those things include bank accounts. So certain countries, for example, don't like it when you live overseas, and once they hear about you moving overseas, may close your home country bank account. Similar from a mortgage perspective, typically when you take out a mortgage in countries like the UK or Europe, they have different arrangements if you rent a house out versus if you live in it. So if, for example, you lived in your house and then go to rent it out, there may be implications or restrictions that wouldn't allow you from the bank perspective. So I think what I'm trying to say is everybody, as much as they want to be excited about their new life, should also put some time in the diary to think about making sure their house is in order.
Great. So Mike, can you tell me and explain to me how Skybound goes further beyond than just wealth management?
Listen, wealth management is at the core of what we do. It's what we're renowned for. It's what our reputation evolves around. But ultimately, we're not here to persuade people to move overseas. We're here to support them, you know, whether that be from a home country perspective or whether that be from one expatriate location to another. So for us, it's about education, it's about source, it's about being a resource, it's about working with people, whether it be their basic financial planning, such as their wills, their guardianships, their insurance, whether it's around tax, whether it's understanding their obligations or requirements in their home country, whether it's working about them, setting them up, helping them with budget. So one of the most important things when you get overseas is budget. Lots of people, when they move to Dubai, have worked out somehow that they're going to be a lot more wealthier and opportunistic than they are in their home country. And often when you work the budgets and realize the additional expenses and the cost of living in places like the UAE, certainly need some time spent around that. And then looking when they can start to replace some of the things they have back in the UK or in their home country, like savings, pensions, tax-free investments, etc.
So Mike, there's a big gap between kind of dream and reality. What are kind of some of the pitfalls that people fall into when they arrive?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. One is a dream and one is a reality. Yeah. So listen, we've all got caught up in that trap. You know, we take a holiday somewhere, we see the vision, you know, we see the pictures and we fall in love with, you know, our expectation. And for many people, listen, they live that life, you know, and Dubai is a great home for lots of very successful people. But there is also another type of person that has to go to work, has to find a house, has to put their kids in school, has to find after kids activity, has to think about their finances, Can they afford those? What type of lifestyle should they or shouldn't they have? So I think, yes, Dubai is a dream, but there is a level of reality, and there certainly is a reality check that a lot of expats fall into 3, 6, 9 months into their tenure here for sure.
So Mike, now that families are here and starting to get a little bit settled, what are the most common paperwork pitfalls that you tend to see?
My biggest advice for any expatriate moving to Dubai, UAE, is the basis that they bring with them their historic life, either in a box or some sort of cloud document. Yeah, it's amazing when you start interacting with your old life. It's tax return time. You need to find details of your insurance. You need to file or lodge your will in this home country. All of those things need a copy of those old documents. So I urge everybody to make sure they have a sample of their old insurances, their wills, their guardianship documents, their policies, their ID numbers, all somewhere where they can access. All too often when I speak to clients, they have to wait 2 or 3 months to go for their next journey back to their home country, which means too long. In terms of UAE, the biggest challenge here is making sure that documents, or the right documents, are attested. So for example, if you have a university degree and you need that for your ID based upon your job role, then of course it can often take weeks or 2 months to get those attested. Often people need qualifications, and again, all of those need to be sourced. So make sure you're just prepared. What I would always say is if you know the company that you're joining before you arrive, just liaise and speak with their HR and find out in advance what paperwork will you need, what documents, what certificates, and that gives you time to prepare before you arrive, and then the appropriate attestation can be done in good time.
So your first 90 days of anyone arriving here can be really intense. What does that kind of look like, and how can you avoid it being so expensive?
I find it intense and expensive. Intense in so much that you have a lot of responsibility often. Often when you arrive, you need to start a new job. You've got a new job, new colleagues, new levels of responsibility. At the same time, you might have family members. Okay, they're asking lots of questions. But the most important thing is you get yourself really set up. You get that framework in. So the most important thing I'd suggest is making sure you get your Emirates ID as quickly as possible. Your Emirates ID is your license to get all of the things that you need. Without your Emirates ID, it's difficult. Yeah. So Emirates ID first. For most company, that comes then with your health insurance for you and your family members. So that's sort of like target number one. Then we move on to the sort of logistical stuff. So you need a bank account. You need a phone. Yeah. If you're renting a property or potentially buying a property, all of those things come with having to find a right place, having to lodge some checks. The biggest thing that people often don't realize here is how much money they will need to front from their own pocket, yeah, in terms of expenditure. So some property, unlike a lot of the countries we come from, Australia, UK, Europe, America, you often need a year in advance in rent checks, yeah. Now you can negotiate those down to a quarter, but certainly if you're paying 1 month deposit, 3 months rent, that for most expatriates is quite a big commitment. Then you start turning on bills. Again, you need to leave deposits. Again, same for school fees. Yeah, if you find the right school, they want some sort of debenture, they want some sort of deposit, they want some sort of terms in advance. So I think most important thing is people really need to budget that while people might be on a salary and they think that's an attractive salary, actually you may need 3, 6, 9 months of salary in advance before you move, particularly if you're one that has responsibilities of children, you're slightly older, you want to lead a certain standard of living, because all of that will require some level of cash, which you need to bring from your home country. Ideally, you have it here because they'll probably want it in dirhams. You need to think, of course, about effective FXing of that money as well and where you store that money.
So this one surprises a lot of people when they arrive here, is what do they need to think about when retirement planning in the UAE?
So this can be a massive pitfall for expatriates. Yeah, the biggest reason for is in some respects, retirement planning, pension planning is almost done for us in many of the home countries that we come from. So in the US, it's a 401k. In the UK, it might be a pension or a works pension. In Australia, it might be a superannuation. And many of those schemes allocate somewhere between sort of 7.5% to 15% of your salary, your total salary, towards your retirement account. In this particular country, it kind of happens, but kind of doesn't. Yeah. So most companies will use a gratuity account. A gratuity account is not money that goes into a pension. It's money that your accounts team will keep to one side that they may pay you, or most likely will pay you when you leave. The difference is if you work for us for 3 years and then you change jobs, that gratuity gets paid to you in your final salary. With the greatest respect in the world, most people end up spending that or reallocating it. So you never really have those sort of pension or retirement pots that we would do. So one of the reasons I believe that we feel like you get paid more in the UAE than you would perhaps in your home country is that sort of 7.5% to 15% cost of a pension needs to be taken from your salary and allocated to your own retirement pot. Yeah, but too many people start here and after 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years have not allocated or saved anything into a retirement pot. And the implications of that money not growing for 10, 20, 30 years can be significant. Yeah, so people are heavily advised to really start that process on day one and not get into the bad habit of trying to think about it in 2, 3, 4 years' time.
Let's talk about risk. So what happens if people think that their insurance or their wills or guardianship applies here?
Yeah, they might do in some respects, but the most important thing is you need to have them checked out. Yeah. So for example, there are probably a number of factors that I would look at. What happens if I die to my money? What happens if I die to my children? Yeah. And what happens if I lose my job? What happens if I lose my health? What happens if I lose my livelihood? So all of those are areas of risk that need to be assessed. So first and foremost, if you have a home country will, you need to understand whether that would cover you in the UAE. If you start saving or investing in money in different jurisdictions, you need to work out whether that will covers your money in those jurisdictions. Yeah. When it comes to family, we talk about guardianship. Guardianship can be both in terms of temporary guardianships, i.e. if something happened to me now, who gets to look after my children today? And more importantly, and ultimately, who gets to look after my children in the long term, and at what point can they have my money, et cetera, et cetera. Insurance is an interesting one. In lots of countries that you take insurance out, insurance does not work here. In many countries, insurance does work here, but sometimes there are nuances or caveats that need to be thought through. So often critical illness policies, if you look at the small print, it says, for example, it does cover you if you live in the UAE, but it might be a UK doctor, if you're doing a policy in the UK, that would have to allocate or sign off that claim, and you'd have to visit the UK. And for somebody with a critical illness, that can be quite a nuance. Yeah. So for me, it's always about bring your will, bring your guardianship, if you have them or don't have them, bring your insurance, and let an appropriate person that's qualified to do so with experience in your home country and international understand what you have, what works, what doesn't, and what shortfalls you may have, and then what actions can be taken.
So Mike, let's talk about some of the costs that families really need to think about when moving to the UAE.
So raising kids in the UAE without doubt is expensive. Yeah, it's one of the biggest things that holds people back from savings and investings. Yeah. So think about the logical stuff, which is insurance, visas, travel. Think about school fees. For many respects, school fees for some people is completely new. Yeah. With addition of that private school cost is also the extra school clubs, it's the participations, it's the involvement, it's all of the activities. Even going back to your home country once or twice a year means you're having to buy 3 or 4 seats, not your typical 2. And then, of course, trust me, there's always the big parties. There's always the first birthday parties that are bigger than anybody else's. And again, that all kind of needs to be taken into account.
So Mike, people hear about no income tax, but what is that real picture?
No income tax. It's as simple as that. No, listen, it attracts so many people when they first move to this part of the world. You know, compared to domestic markets now, where we see sort of 40 and 50%, it really is a nice, great feeling that you get paid gross in this part of the world. Listen, there are some taxes. You know, we've got VAT, albeit mild. You might have taxes in your home country if you're renting out your old property, for example. But in the main, you're going to be way better off here by paying no tax. There are some downsides, like typically in our home country, we'd get some form of state pension, we get some form of unemployment benefits. So that puts a lot more responsibility on us to make sure that we've got the right retirement provision and we've got the right insurances. But also, why don't people use the no tax as an opportunity to save a little? Yeah. So for example, if you were paying 40% tax back in London and you're no longer paying that, then you have every opportunity to find that 40% and say, listen, I was paying that before to the taxman. Why don't I put that away and let that work for me? And that's my only real advice to people.
So let's address something that's really important to consider. How easy is it to fall into debt here?
Unfortunately for most, it's too easy. Yeah. So listen, I've been here for so long. I've seen so many examples, so many case studies. Person comes off the flight, gets here for the first couple of months, they get their first couple of salaries, and actually the numbers aren't adding up. And sometimes that's because they're going out a little bit more than they should, they're exploring, they're taking some trips. But in many respects, it can be curtains for their apartment, or it can be, some kitchen utensils. And ultimately, when those numbers aren't adding up, they start to feel the pinch, a pinch that they weren't possibly expecting a few months ago when they had this dream of the UAE. So what happens? Right on cue, the bank call and say within a couple of days, they can dispatch this credit card, maybe 4, 5, 6 times your salary. Immediately, you've got that. What do? You take it as a just-in-case measure. You use it once, you use it twice, and before you know it, you've maxed out on your credit cards. A credit card that probably has a 40 to a 50% penalty. Yeah. Bang on cue, the bank call again and ask you to consolidate that loan over a 2, 3, 4, 5-year period, and all of a sudden it gives you that level of breathing space. And some people even run up that credit card debt again. For many people, they spend the first 2 or 3, 4 years in the UAE. If they're bad at budgeting, if they don't quite have that restraint that they should do, just getting back to the stage at which they came all those years ago. So yeah, sometimes debt is nice. Yeah, sometimes it can help you out in a tricky moment. But for most people, they need to solve the problem that they can't manage their books, not that the bank is the answer to unnecessary debt, because they'll be paying that back for many years to come. And it will really spoil their UAE experience.
So buying property in the UAE does sound appealing, but what are some of the real barriers that people are facing?
Property's been very popular here now for the last few years, mostly because the prices have been going one way, very positive. But having been here for so long, it's not always been that way. Yeah. So for example, just before COVID, we had 7 years of consecutive negative downturn. Lots of people were in negative equity. Nobody wanted to buy Dubai property, and they certainly weren't prepared to pay a premium for it. And of course, now in the last few years, ever since COVID, we've got into this sort of stage where everybody wants to buy it again, because of course they're seeing other people's returns. So I would sort of focus UAE property into 2 elements: somewhere to live for your family, yeah, and of course rental properties. So the first thing you've got to look at is, if you're buying to live in it, for example, is the deposit. So in lots of home countries or home state countries, you can put 5, 10% down. In this particular country, when you put down your deposit plus your other fees, you're looking close to 30%. So if you're buying a $1 million property, people need $300,000 to get onto that market, which for many has almost become a step too far now. Yeah. So the question is often about timing. I think timing is more important when you're looking at investment. Timing is probably slightly less important if you're looking at the emotional side of wanting somewhere to live and making your own. But after 7 years of consecutive growth, arguments now are starting to creep in as to whether we're starting to see the top of the market, particularly with the huge amount of explosion of off-plan and all of those units that will start to be handed over in the next 1 or 2, 3 years. So I think it's important for people to take advice, not necessarily just from the real estate guys, because they will obviously promote the state of the marketplace. But I think if you work with an independent advisor that can help you understand the cycle, the market, the values that potentially might be had in the long term, then it may or may not be a good opportunity for you in the future.
So once the boxes are unpacked and life starts to settle down a bit, what are the next steps that families really need to start thinking about when they're financial planning?
I think I would always divide it into 2 elements. It's your enjoyment of the moment. In many respects, if I'm 35, I've got a young family, I want them to feel safe and secure. I want them to enjoy their lifestyle. I want them to take some nice trips. I want us to have memories of our time in this part of the world. But at the same time, for most people, that financial element, that objective, that goal at the end of the road is all but so important, whether that be the positive, i.e. I get there, or the negative, I don't get there. So again, for me, it's looking at the basics. So the boring stuff, but yet important, can be the wills, the guardianship, the budgeting, the tax planning, yeah, making sure your affairs back in your home country are correct and up to date. And then the positive element is, what's my goals for the future? Is it a milestone amount? Is it a passive income? Is it a retirement goal? Yeah. But all of these things need some level of accountability, some thought process, and again, working with an advisor, an independent advisor that can help you think big picture. Okay, will pay dividends as part of that cycle.
So what are some of the real mistakes that you've seen people make, and how can they avoid them in the future?
My top few would be having this presumption that your investments or policies or wills, for example, work when you move overseas. Yeah, spend that little bit of extra time either yourself or with an advisor, just making sure that everything back in your home country works as efficiently and effectively as you would want. Yeah. Number two is making sure that people make sure they bring the right documents with them, bringing that file, that past life file that they can access really easy. The third one would making sure that we've adapted to their new lifestyle. So what should they be saving? What should their insurances be? And the fourth one, and probably the biggest, and it's all part of this not getting into debt situation, make sure your framework for accountability is on point. Yeah, do not get paid, randomly spend, see what may or may not be left over each month. If you're on a salary, work out, even if it's for the first 6 months you don't spend additional monies over and above salary, that's okay. Just why you set yourself up. But then set yourself a target that, say, month 6, you're going to start saving 10, 20, 30% of your salary, and don't let that slip. Whatever you do, don't start using those credit cards just because you get some air miles or some points. Slippery path. For most people, it doesn't end well. I think for me, it's about making sure that you're committed to the cause. Yeah, there was a great expression I heard many years ago. If you're going to take the island, burn the boats. Yeah, and that's for me like lifestyle overseas. You know, before in your home country, you may have had a will, you may have had insurances, you may have had a pension. Often what happens when people come overseas is it's like there's a little bit of wait and see. I'm not sure about my job, or maybe I'm waiting for a pay rise, or maybe my company are going through some sort of corporate restructure. And all of these things kick decision making down the road. And it's not unusual that people that are 1, 2, 3, 4 years in still haven't sorted out some of the most basics of financial planning, and also have no understanding of what they need to be doing for the future. So their net worth, their value, so to speak, has not changed in all the years that they've been in the UAE, because they're still worried about something that may or may not happen in their life. My biggest advice to people, okay, because it benefits 99% of the population, is start now, adapt, and move to something productive.
So for someone who's never worked with a financial planner, what can they expect from working with Skybound?
Do you know the biggest mistake that people make, and I see this more and more now than ever before, is people have this assumption that we buy ETFs. Yeah, and that's not what we do. Yeah, what we do is holistically look after people. So if we're working together, I'd assess your current situation, and it might be that you need help with some of the things that you have in your home country. It might be that you need with a budget, some form of accountability. We need to assess and value what type of shortfalls you might have in healthcare, life cover, savings, investments. And the most important thing is we put a master plan together. A master plan covers everything from the negatives to the positives. Now, some of that is we might go and buy some ETFs, we might do some saving, we might do some insurances, but it's a holistic 360 overview of how we help you understand where you are today, the mistakes that you may make, the mistakes that we don't want you to make, and how we can ultimately get you to a perfect outcome that when you leave the UAE, you leave with a sense of fulfillment, that you achieve something both financially and credible.
So Mike, what one piece of advice can you offer to those who are watching that is a step that they can take now?
I think whether you've moved here or not, or whether you've just arrived, the most important thing is like awareness, it's accountability, it's education, it's knowledge. So by all means, follow us. We do so much content, and it's all about educating people around us. But I think the single most important thing is you jump on a call with one of our experts, whether you're still in your home country and starting to learn and understand what is required. I have lots of clients or new clients ring me before they've arrived saying, listen, this is my job offer. I'm trying to work out what I'm going to spend, how much would be left over, what would be the implications. And then we can help them with their wills, their guardianships, their insurance, their savings, their pensions, their accountability, that master plan that I keep referring to, all much needed for new coming expats into the UAE.
Great. Thanks so much, Mike. And thank you again for your time today and some very useful insights there. And thank you for everyone who's watching as well. And join us next time.